everyone. It is May 14th, and we're back for another round of Speaking with Spirit. I'm going to go ahead and trust my higher conscious to choose for me. It seems to be working out really well when I do that. So right now I'm going to really short meditation to clear my channel. Now I'm going to ask my higher consciousness who they would like me to bring. Yes, Andrea. Please bring in Jesse James. Oh, we got Jesse James. Here we go. Thank you. Jesse James, are you there? He says, I am. He's all, I don't quite know how to accept such a gift. But nonetheless, I'm glad I'm here. Jesse James was more of an outcast than he was an outlaw. So I was an outlaw, don't get me wrong. But I was an outcast even better than that. Sorry, excuse me. Ooh. He says, Andrea, I'd like to start out by saying to your viewers, what an exceptional person you are. Okay, just thanks. He says, no, really, upon first viewing you, I saw in you details. Unmistakable details. I consider myself fortunate to have you as the medium to help me tell my story. Thank you, Jesse Earl James. My name was Jesse, Andrea. Jesse's what they called me. I called me late for dinner. I never really had dinner. I never really had much of anything. Which is where my story's gonna start. As a boy, were you an only child, Jesse? You weren't. You had siblings? Were they younger or older? Okay, so you were the oldest of siblings that were much younger than you? Yes. We were poor. I remember my pop more than anyone. I would dread him coming home. There was a fear in me, girl, I can't even explain. I just knew that I hated when he came home. My mom tensed up, which tensed me up. We always knew what we were going to get. That's one thing about old Pops. You just could always rely on him to never change. One night, when my pop came in, my mom was at the stove. He came in leaning up against the doorway like this, or this, watching my mom, just staring at her. She walked away from the pot that she was stirring. As soon as she turned her back to walk away, he flipped the handle. He tossed the stew on the floor, basically. Andrea, he did more than toss it. He bounced it. Off. Bounced it off the table. And then the hot stew spattered my mom, my mother, front. She was burned. There were burns on her face and neck. I'll never forget her healing of that. It was long and painful and slow. And she just never was the same after that. To me, she was still my mom. She looked like my mom. I loved her like my mom. But in the changing of her face, the scarring, my mom changed too. There were no more smiles from my mom. I never saw my mom smile after that, after the burn. My dad didn't give a care. He never looked at my mom after that either. He never put his eyes on her. Probably because of shame. But he would often tell her that he can't look at her because she looks disgusting. Well, you can imagine, Andrea, I grew up a very angry kid and into my adulthood as a young man. I grew more angry. I grew bigger. I grew madder, meaner. I couldn't stand the sight of my old man. I had no recourse. I had nowhere to go. I didn't have a thing of my own. Nothing, no land, no no means in which to start out on my own as a young man. I was basically defenseless against the world when I left the old man's house. When I left, it was by my right. It was by my choosing. I had had enough of watching my pops destroy those in my family. I was angry at him. I was angry at them. I was angry at the whole world. I was a boy of just 15, in the middle of 15. There was an argument, as usual, at the dinner table between my dad and one of my younger siblings. I remember clutching the spoon in my right hand and the fork in my left hand and squeezing them. I had drowned out the argument. I looked down at both hands. I looked up at my mother. I saw that my knuckles were white. Right then I knew I would not come back to this place again. I wouldn't see my family again. I unclenched the spoon and the fork from my hands. I set them down gently. I stood up. I excused myself from the table. I kind of nodded at my mom. And I walked out the door. And walk I did. It had gotten dark as I was eating dinner. So it was definitely dark when I went out the front door. I had a sleeve, a long sleeve coat I was carrying. I had boots where the soles were coming off at the outsides of my feet. My jeans, my pants were ratty, old work. Nothing to write home about. The state of affairs was this. No matter what I looked like, what I felt like was what drove me away. The feeling of helplessness, of not being able to do a darn thing about something that I thought was so horrendous. Such a mean-spirited person to hurt innocent people for his own amusement. I couldn't I couldn't see that anymore. I didn't know what was ahead of me. I didn't care what was behind me. I just walked. Jesse James. I became pretty popular pretty fast. I was going nowhere at full speed ahead. I wasn't going home. Not unless I was in a body bag. I didn't have a career in mind. I didn't have a pot to piss in. I didn't even have a horse. But I did have a lot of guts. I had a lot of anger in me. A rebel. You could say that I felt rebellious. I was resentful to the whole world. For not seeing me, for me not making a bit of difference to anybody's life. Not even my own. I hated my pops. I felt so sorry for my mom and siblings. And I felt like a coward for leaving. But I would have felt more like a coward for staying. To watch that abuse, I couldn't do it. Andrea Jesse James began riding the trains at night, getting to know the layout of the lands. A train would stop, I'd get off. Another one would pull up, I'd jump on. I ate out of crates on the railroad cars. It wasn't bad. I saw a lot of stars. It was better to travel at night. And then one day I saw it. The loading and the unloading of money, of gold, treasures. Rich women had furs and jewelry. And that's when I saw an opportunity. An advantage that I had over anyone else was that I knew these trains. I'd been on them 6 months or so, just riding. But I knew their every move. The conductor, how long a train would be at a stop, how many people would get on, if people got on, how much freight was loaded or unloaded, who the freight men were, what time they came out, when they went home, what time they ate. There wasn't much I didn't know about the rail system. I saw a lot of opportunity and a lot of money, and I was going to get me some. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I just knew I was going to get it. I guess I grew bored. No. Andrea, I know that I grew bored. The seeing, the coming and going of people with lives and nice clothes and a destination they were excited about, and made me realize I still had nothing. I didn't want to be the boy who had nothing for the rest of his life. I didn't understand these happy people coming and going, smiling at each other and being nice. But I had a sense that they wouldn't like me. It kept me angry. I robbed my first train at 9:18 in the morning. I did it in the morning when the freight was just unloaded onto the dock, or I seized my chance. I had time with the freight without any of the workers around. I looked in a few. He had to pop or pry until I found the one that had what I thought I wanted, which was silver, looked like silver plates, or there was no cash, but I saw silver and I took it. I went back to the back and hid in a railroad freight car that I knew no one would look in. And I rode the train that day, all day. I stayed in there the next few stops, just looking at my loot. I didn't know what I was going to do with silver plates and silver cups, but it was silver and I knew it had value. I stayed the night on the train, and the next morning I got off. It was like four silver plates and 4 silver goblets. I had them all wrapped in my jacket, and I was going to go to town, and I was going to speak to a merchant and get whatever I could for him. That's exactly what I did. I jumped that first morning train, another train going away, and the first town that we came to was about 3 hours. I got off and I found a merchant. He didn't give me what it was worth, but I got something. It was the first time I had seen money in my hand ever. I had money. The first thing I did was I bought a meal. As I sat there and ate, I realized how poor looking my dress was. So I went and bought some clothes. I left a really good tip with my food, or for my food. After I bought and put on my new clothes, I felt more like a man. I had nice boots. I stood up straighter. I had a nice western shirt. I felt good. But I wasn't going to be done until I got a horse. So I bought a horse. not that evening. I stayed in a brothel, I rented a room. He said no. He said I was by myself, and that next morning I bought a horse. It changed my whole pattern. All of a sudden I had this huge animal that I was responsible for. It wasn't going to be possible now for me to jump from train to train whenever I wanted. Definitely not going to take the horse with me. But I love that horse. I loved that I owned a horse. And I figured if I can own a horse, I can own a house, a land, many horses. And as soon as I get that, I'll stop riding the trains. I'll stop robbing the trains. History regarding me is pretty dead on. I know that most people, their lives are not portrayed correctly through media, newspapers, but mine was pretty accurate. I was an outlaw. People expected a certain something from me, and I gave it to them. I died the same way I was when I walked out of my father's house for the last time. I died with nothing. My boots were peeling away at the soles on the sides. My jeans were filthy. I don't know when I had my last meal. I'd even lost my horse. That was a good horse. I'll never forget that horse. Losing that horse hurt more than anything else had in my whole life. That moment is when I knew that I had a heart that was capable of love, and not just anger in it. I'm sorry, I think I'm hearing him say my horse was named. I named my horse Saddle. He named him Feelers. Wait, Freelance. Okay, it was a him. Sundance or Sundown? Sundowner. Sundowner. He was not only the best horse I ever had, he was the only horse I ever had. I never cared for another one. That horse was just fit for me. It was like he knew me better than anyone. And he still chose to be with me. By the time I was killed with bullets, I was ready. I went out with a bang. I was tired of being tired. And no matter what, I stole, no matter how much I made, I still would, it would slip through my fingers. I still had nothing. I was on the run all the time, and I was tired of running. I am incarnate now. I'm a lawmaker instead of a lawbreaker. I own 2 homes. Just purchasing another one, real estate. He has a real estate license. The best thing about my life is my ranch. My cattle ranch. I have more than 1 horse. I have a crew of men working for me. And I've made all my money myself. Would I go back and do it all again? What's the point? What I'm doing right now, I would do again and again and again. The value of the note I hand you, Andrea, is what you do with it. Whether it's going to have value or not. Remember that. You put the value in the money. Only you can put the value in the money once it's in your hand. And with that, dinner's ready. I gotta go. Alright, that was Jess James. Thanks, Jess.